talk to Professor Godfred Bokpin. Of course, we know him. He's an economist and he's with the University of Ghana Business School. Prof, thank you so much for joining us twice in a row this week. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
And good morning to our terrorist listeners.
So, Prof, I mean, maybe a quick cons lesson from you. Is that how it works? Is that all that we needed to do all this time that our city was losing value? Did it only require one meeting between the governor, the finance minister, and the president to decide on what the value should be?
Thank you very much, Kojo. I don't think it was just the recent meeting. I had indicated much earlier that the central bank was targeting exchange rates. They just didn't want to communicate that to the market at the initial stage. So it was not just a more recent meeting where they decided on this. They knew largely where they were heading to. Then that is why we said that what we witnessed in terms of the strengthening of the local currency was not just the forces of demand and supply. There was an intervention to cause the strengthening. And we were concerned that the rate of appreciation was too aggressive to enable planning and the entire economy to adjust to the strengthening of the currency. And to that extent, you could not describe that as stability. That was more of a disruption. A disruption could cause negative benefits or positive as well. That was what we witnessed. And it was very difficult for people to play along and to even plan. And it was quite unsettling. We knew to some extent that we would be arriving between 10 plus or minus 1 or so way back, more than a month ago. But it's also good that there's some level of clarity that, yes, we need to stabilize. Beyond the aggressive strengthening, we need to stabilize. Stability is treasured over wide swings. Whether appreciation or depreciation is neither good for businesses nor for even the central bank in the first place. Of course, we also do know that stability in economics is not the same as same price or fixed price over time. We still expect that there will be changes, some kind of variation in the rate, but it should not be significant enough to cause disruptions or uncertainty when it comes to planning. And what we have seen here is not just something that we can celebrate totally. It came along with considerable disadvantages, even to government records or books as well, whilst businesses are also recalibrating, counting the losses that they have booked. Of course, for the exchange rate losses, businesses would claim that through their tax filings. What it also means is that it's going to affect government revenue envelope at the end of the day. In fact, we expect that there will be considerable challenges in meeting our revenue targets. And if you look at the projection for this year, and you situate that within the 2025 budget, it was one of the reasons why I took a position that I have a soft side towards this levy. Because if you look at the 2025 budget and you look at government obligations, even procuring fuel for the rest of this year, we don't have that fiscal space. Any further expenditure the Minister of Finance decides to incur will have serious implications for our program with the fund in terms of the primary balance that we need to meet. And we just don't have that space. So there are difficult decisions that we have to take whilst government rolls out reforms and all of that. So that is where we are. But I think that going forward, we should be able to stabilize the currency in a more fundamental and predictable way. What that will mean also, Kodo, is that even though we have improved FX supply of foreign currencies, the fact that it's available necessarily doesn't mean the central bank to allow it to flow through the market. The central bank can equally come onto the market to mop up FX in the same way that when the Cedi is depreciating beyond a certain band, which will cause dislocation in the economy, they can sell dollars on its own account, it could also buy dollars on its own account. That is how it works. So the central bank, as a regulator, cannot sit aloof and say that it's just the forces of demand and supply. Let's just watch it to go as far as it will go. No, that is not management.
So, Prof, based on this, you are suggesting that the central bank should use all the resources available to manage the exchange rate to stay within the optimal 10 to 12 Ghana cedi to the dollar range.
I think that stability will be helpful for us going forward. Remember that a currency like the USD, which historically is very strong, if any intervention causes it to become a little cheaper than what it is, it signals a time to buy. And don't forget that in our history, anytime there's a sharp appreciation, after a couple of months or even a year or so, you see a reversal, especially when you cannot situate that sharp aggression within a structural and productivity transformation of your economy. You want to be mindful. The other thing to also bear in mind is that assuming we have right leadership and the president says that I am uncomfortable the distraction to our environment, our water bodies, and our forests. And suddenly one day the president wakes up and identifies with every Ghanaian that we must tackle this aggressively. In the same way they cause the cedi to strengthen aggressively, there will be structural break in terms of supply of gold. Because the bulk of the gold we are buying is from artisanal small-scale mining. Largely, they are doing irresponsible mining. For instance, maybe we should help us. You should help us. Gold Board should tell us the companies and the firms that they are buying the gold from, whether they are doing responsible mining, the environmental impact report they have done, and all of that. Bank of Ghana should tell us the gold they've been buying to show up our reserves. What is the environmental social governance impact they have done? Are they doing responsible mining? In the same way, the Bank of Ghana is forcing ESG on banks and deposit-taking institutions to infuse ESG in their lending model. They should use the same framework in ensuring that all firms that supply gold to them, to Gold Board and the rest of them, are using the same principle and infusing that in their business model. That is where you can infer sustainability. Any growth model that causes extensive distraction to the environment, the way we are going, you should be very careful how you celebrate it.
Prof, I'm getting the sense that the appreciation we are seeing at the moment, you do not necessarily think that it's because it's reflecting economic growth and improvement, but because of the management by the Bank of Ghana. What must we do to sustain this and ensure that we actually see production within the system and stabilize the exchange rate to allow for Ghanaians to plan their lives and their businesses?
Okay, thank you very much. A dominant school of thought in economics is that you need to maintain macroeconomic stability for long as a basis for economic transformation. And economic transformation, you can look at it from two components. Structural transformation, where you shift, there's a movement in terms of from low productivity to high productivity. We can call that structural transformation baseline. And then also productivity transformation, right, along that. To have that, you need macroeconomic stability for long. So we need to guarantee that for everyone, market players. Then we can talk about transformation. I know that it will take a while because the basics of transformation, even if you look at baseline macroeconomic stability, we are struggling to have that for long. What we have seen, Kojo, since 1992 is relative macroeconomic stability in between elections, informed by fiscal discipline, maximum 2.5 years, 3 years, and then prudent monetary policy, and then there's a relapse. Then we have to start again. In fact, those disruptions, the cost of correcting them through higher taxes, levies, are becoming huge. You saw what just happened yesterday. Because is very expensive correcting economic disruptions. And we are not done yet. We are not done. So we need to then move gradually to enabling production within the local economy. So it's about a balance, and I agree with the president. We need to situate the exchange rate within a band that allows our economy to be competitive. To do so, we almost 40-45% of economic activity is movement. We don't have that.
Okay.
If you just can't say that, let me just run to Cape Coast and come back today. It's impossible. So we don't have that. In fact, we are sitting here in Accra. We have no idea that we are more or less in a prison. If something major happens in Accra, there's no escape route. You just can't say that, let me run to Volta region, run to Eastern region, or maybe to Ashanti region. We just don't have the roads.
We'll go to the port and board ships and if the roads won't work.
So it is funny we are talking about transformation in the midst of these constraints.
Yeah.
So
Right,
we just don't
right.
have the basics. So we have a long way to go.
Yeah.
I agree that we've seen considerable leadership. We need to back that. We should be able to also discern sustainability. Oftentimes we say that it's not good enough to know light. You must be able to also discern darkness. Along this path, let's see where the headwinds are and how do we resolve them. But overall, energy, I was willing to say I will sacrifice for the levy to go on because we need to resolve the energy sector. You can't talk about economic transformation without having reliable energy, and it must be cheap as well. And then you link that to all of them. You have seen Cedi strengthening, but that is not broadening. The same cannot be said across all the macro variables. We've seen treasury bill rate come down between 15, 16, but we haven't seen the Ghana reference rate coming down significantly. Why? You know why? The central bank itself has been unwilling to reduce the policy rate. If it was their view that this strengthening of the currency is as a result of transformation in the economy, they will not keep the policy rate still at 28% or so. They will not. And almost 60% of the weight in the Ghana reference rate is attributable to the policy rate and the interbank rate. So once the policy rate is not coming down aggressively the same way that the treasury bill rate came down and the interbank rate, you will see that we are not seeing the benefit of this passing through lending rates. I heard the governor saying that in the next 4 years or so, they are looking at single-digit lending rates. Great. I think we should use the same approach in fast-tracking that to also come down. And then you link that broadly and also see whether there's increase in lending to private sector. It's not just the rate that has to come down. The maturity must also be lengthened. You can see what is happening. In Cote d'Ivoire, you could borrow at less than 8%, 10 or 15 years. Other countries are doing that. That is what we call enabling business environment. It's not just the rate coming down. The maturity must also be lengthened. Otherwise, you run into what we call maturity mismatch. There was a time in this country not long ago, the average maturity of lending was just around 12 months. That kind of lending is not suitable for manufacturing. It is only good for imports, and that is what we have been doing very well. If you see the volume of lending and you look at the sectorial disaggregation, all of that is going towards import, trade, because it's easier. You can import maximum 6 months, you clear your goods, you draw down on your account. This is what we have been doing, and this is not the same as building an economy. Then again, if you see what has been expanding in the last 25 years in this country, you can trace it to, of course, mining. In the last 22 years or so, largely 22% of our economy is driven largely by gold. That has not impacted our revenue envelope that much, and that has also not created decent jobs. So you've seen the economy growing positively, but the employment response has been very weak, because the growth drivers are not coming from the labor-intensive subsectors of the economy. So we have been celebrating what we call jobless growth. Going forward, the economy the president wants to build must be job-rich. We are looking for job-rich growth. Then in that case, you have to be deliberate in ensuring that the growth is driven by the labor-intensive subsectors of the economy. Where can you get that? You can get that from manufacturing, value addition. Apart from gold, which is destroying our environment, the next move will be we are not going to export our gold in the raw form. Let's take that decision now. The goodwill is there. The enabling environment is there. The uncertainty at the global level plays to our advantage. Let's also do that, which makes us unique in the market, because everybody is looking within before they look outside. That is how. So the retail and the wholesale that has expanded in the last couple of decades has not created decent jobs. Visit the malls and see whether they even have formal appointment letters. Our ladies who serve in those shops and the rest of them, find out whether they are on SNIT, they are paying taxes and all of that. Many of them don't. Apart from that, retail and wholesale is not contributing to our tax revenue. So almost 87% or so of our tax revenue is coming from less than 42% of the economy. So it means that we are not growing a taxable economy, and yet we expect that economy to generate sufficient tax revenue. You will be burdening the faithful few.
There's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of work to be done. And Prof, thank you so much for your insights this morning. Maybe later we have to talk about the transparency of the BOG, their strategies, even the communication from the BOG, and how it gives industry the assurance to plan and prepare. But thank you so much for spending the morning with us here on the show.
Thank you, Prof. That's Professor Bokpin of the University of Ghana Business School. All right, then.